all, I want to talk about the grooming gangs and, well, an awful lot of pressure now coming on the Prime Minister to U-turn on his plan not to hold a national public inquiry where people give evidence under oath about the grooming gangs and what happened, who allowed it, who turned a blind eye, who covered it up, and try and get some, you know, some answers, join the dots, as Kemi Badenoch said. But we've had the MP, the Labour MP for Rotherham, that's Sarah Champion, one of the people who was one of the sort of whistleblowers on this issue in Rotherham. She's gone back on what she said last week. She was backing the Prime Minister. Now she says, no, sorry, I've spoken to victims. We need to have an inquiry. The new Labour MP for Rochdale, also an area where there's been a huge problem with grooming gangs, Paul Waugh, he said he thinks there should be inquiry if that's what the victims want. Do you think the pressure inevitably is going to mount and Keir Starmer's going to have to U-turn?
I can only hope so, because there's such wickedness here. The people who are responsible for this, you know, left the police or the social services or the council with knighthoods and OBEs and MBEs. So those people should have those honours stripped away. And in the worst cases, they should be put in prison. I mean, the Labour Party is guilty of hypocrisy here. If you look at the wicked murder of Stephen Lawrence. So Stephen Lawrence was the victim of a racist attack which resulted in his murder, and there was alleged police failings. And so the Labour Party really pressed for a massive inquiry which resulted in all sorts of systematic changes in the police. If we look here, we have racist rapes and murders against young girls where there is allegedly lots of police failings. What's the difference? The difference is there are thousands of people involved in this crime, and of course the difference is in two-tier Britain, if you're white, you're not treated as some kind of victim by the left if you were from an ethnic minority, and that is in this country that is completely unacceptable. Yeah,
I mean, the white privilege that these white working class girls, many of whom were in care, you know, have got, you know, as they were being plied with drugs and alcohol and sodomised by men old enough to be their fathers and grandfathers above a kebab shop in Rotherham or Rochdale or Telford or Oxford or any of the other, you know, 45 plus other cities where this was happening. Their white privilege just, you know, shines through, does it not, Mike?
It's absolutely scandalous. I've said this before. I come from a council house in Bolton. If somebody can tell me where the white privilege was hidden there, I'll go back and get it. Yeah. But it's an absolute scandal that these girls have been treated like this and that those covered it up. And we know that there's official documents which will show that people have said basically that celebrating diversity or maintaining multiculturalism is more important.
Community cohesion, Mike. Community cohesion.
Oh, no, sorry. I've got to keep up with the programme. So community cohesion and all these things. So you have a situation where senior police officers are almost pleading with unappointed, unelected Pakistani elders who dictate. But we saw this after the riots in Southport. We saw in Birmingham and places that the police negotiating with, like I say, unelected, unappointed elders who then dictate to the police what they can and can't do. And that's unacceptable.
And we see it again and again. It is extraordinary. I think Keir Starmer's massively out of touch on this issue. And there's no particular reason why, if there was an inquiry, we're told it has to take 7 years. Well, it doesn't need to take that long. You can make it much shorter and clearer and more focused than that. But also, it doesn't mean that police investigations can't continue at the same time.
Of course. So all these things could be done in parallel, but we need, this scandal is so deep. It covers so many different parts of the country. And I said last night on Kevin O'Sullivan's show, this isn't just a UK problem. No. This is a Western European problem. The liberal elites have allowed this to go on. I was in Germany after the sex attacks in Cologne. The government tried to cover it up.
Well, the ones that didn't happen. Jess Phillips, now Home Office Minister, said they never happened. Nothing worse than Broad Street on an average Saturday night.
And it's the same in Sweden, the same attempts by the government in Sweden to cover it up. And it'll be the same in France and Belgium. You have a liberal elite who rule Western Europe who've decided that multiculturalism is the way forward. And if this means that little girls have got to be raped and murdered, then such is life. We'll crack on with it. And it is This is a scandal.
It is so extraordinary, isn't it? We're not going to let it go away. Mike, I also just finally want to touch on a Prisons Watchdog report. The Inspector of Prisons, Chief Inspector of Prisons, Charlie Taylor, he's been warning about drones being used to get contraband into prison cells, being flown literally to the prison cell window. They're cutting a hole in their window. The prison, they're able to get the stuff from the drones. It was drugs, it was contraband, it was money, it was cigarettes. Now they're worried it's now a security risk because they're able to fly in weapons, even guns. How concerned are you about this?
Really concerned. I mean, last year there was over 200 reports of drones flying near prisons.
That's the one they know of.
Luckily, what they know, and what we know is that these drones can carry about £3 in a sort of a bag of sugar, but that's going to get more and more in the future. They're looking at, could it carry a person, like a James Bond style, rescue? But of course, £3 could carry £3 weight could be a knife, a gun. And so the prisons have got to look at, before they were secured in doors and windows from the sides, now they've got to look at above. They've got to have these nets across, they've got to have proper CCTV, and they've got to have more drone detection devices. Because one thing's sure, Julia, is that the authorities are always slow. Criminals are always much quicker to use technology to their own benefit. They don't have risk assessments. They don't have data protection. They just crack on and use them.
Absolutely. And again, I always think, if you're not actually able to keep, drugs and guns and God knows what out of prison, then what hope for the rest of us out in civvy life? Mike Neville, former Met Police DCI, thank you so much for that. Sam Armstrong, I mean, it is extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, I just imagine the consequences. And we know that it can be done very, very easily, of a gun getting into a prison estate. Many of these prisons are far outside of cities now. We build many of them.
Who'd be a prison officer now?
If a prisoner gets a gun into a prison, he will be able to literally waltz out the door with a gun, committing heinous violence on our streets, and the chances of them being caught quickly, low.
Absolutely.